So welcome back to the workshop, and as you can see, I've been busy and I've made some decent progress with the Navatone, and I must admit I'm very pleased with the way she's looking very cool at the moment. So let me show you how I got up to this point. Right, so I'm at the stage now where the neck is ready to be fitted to the body, and as you can see I've roughly cut the dovetail out, and it needs that really fine fettling now to get the neck fitting perfectly so it's aligned along the length and I've got the correct pitch. And the procedure is exactly the same as you would have seen in one of the previous videos when I reset the neck of the original Guyatone. Well, the neck's been glued on, and what I'm doing now is just making sure that the fretboard is perfectly aligned along the length of the instrument, and then when I'm 100% happy with that, I will drill through these little holes I've pre-drilled in the fretboard into the neck and put some wooden pegs in, like you would have seen me do with the Guyatone when I actually removed that original fretboard. The alignment on this is really super critical though, because I've got zero tolerance at this end. Because I've bound that head, I've set the width exactly of that head, so the fretboard has got to be perfectly aligned with it, so that I get this smooth transition from the edge of the fretboard onto the to the bindings. So yeah, that's the stage I'm up to now. So as you can see, all of the pegs are in place, 8 of them, so that will hold the fretboard perfectly aligned when I actually come to glue it. I'm not ready to glue it on yet, because what I need to do is make up the little wedge which goes underneath the fretboard at this end, just to support it, because if you remember, the neck leans back, so obviously there's a gap here that has to be filled. So this wedge, which supports the end of the fretboard, that's been cleaned up level with the neck, and that's exactly how it was on the original Guyatone. This great big dovetail surrounded by this wedge. So before the fretboard's glued on, you must remember to insert the two-way truss rod. This has been wrapped with PTFE tape, just to really protect the rod itself from any potential corrosion. And of course, when you glue the fretboard on, you don't want any glue oozing onto it. So that the PTFE tape protects the truss rod. And then what I also like to do is just put a couple of little dobs of silicone sealant, 3 places. That doesn't glue this in place, but what it does do is it kind of dampens down the potential for this to vibrate. Because what you don't want is this to vibrate kind of sympathetically with a certain note and have an annoying buzz, which for the life of you can't locate because it's inside the neck there. So yeah, so that goes in, then the fretboard on. Right, so with the truss rod in place, I'll glue the fretboard on. That underside of the rosewood has been cleaned up with some methylated spirits to decrease it, and of course I've got my little pegs to keep it perfectly aligned, and yeah, I'll be using Type-On for that. Right, so the next step then is to level off the fretboard, and then once it's nice and flat, I put the radius on, a compound radius on the surface of the fretboard. This is what I use. It's just a very simple piece of box section extruded aluminium, and as I progress, I'll stick various grades of abrasive paper on it with double-sided tape. Many luthier suppliers sell this as a levelling beam or fancy names or whatever, but actually all you need is a bit of aluminium box section, and then I shall use a combination of 10-inch radius block at this end and a 12 or maybe a 14 at the other end to get the compound radius that I need. So it's all really quite a lot about sanding. So when I'm sanding with a radius block, I like to put lots of lines backwards and forwards with a white pencil on the fretboard, and then when you're sanding, where you've sanded, obviously the white line disappears, and where you haven't sanded, there's still the white line. So it acts as a good indicator of where you need to go and where you're born. So I finished sanding the fretboard, and I went through different grades of paper, as I said, 80, 120, 240. I'm leaving it at 240 because what I'm going to do now is I'm going to put in the position markers, and they'll be exactly the same as on the original Guyatone. There'll be these little blocks made from perloid, which is obviously in keeping with this kind of early Japanese electric vibe that I'm going for here. And then once they've been inlaid, the whole fretboard will have to be sanded again, and then that's when I'll use my finer paper. There's no point in doing it twice. So yeah, inlay the fretboard. So all of those inlays have been cleaned up, and that surface is now ready for me to start fretting. I've cleaned out the fret slots, make sure they're the correct depth, and then I just use a triangular 3 square needle file just to put a slight chamfer on the top edge of those slots. I use a hammer, traditional way of putting them in, and the hammer I use is a simple ball peen hammer. Again, you can see lots of specialists selling fretting hammers, but this is a ball peen hammer. I must have fretted over 100 instruments with this, and as you can see, the head of it, this surface has been polished so that when you hit the fret, if you hit it square on, it doesn't damage the frets at all. It's important that you have something for the neck to rest on. One of the main problems that people have, I think, when they do fret is if the neck's not supported properly and you're hammering in, if it's allowed to bounce, if there's any kind of recoil, the fret doesn't seat properly. So it's important that it's got nowhere to go. These are one of my favourite tools. These are my fret cutters. They're obviously cutters, it actually says for music wire, but they're made by Starrett in the USA, and on here is a patent date, November the 14th 1899. So suffice to say, these are probably well over 100 years old, but they are the most wonderful tool for cutting frets. You've got this double lever action, which of course magnifies your effort, and it cuts the fret wire really easily. And then right at the end, when I come to do the stoning of the frets, as we used to call it back in the day, levelling the frets, I would again use my piece of aluminium box section, and this time on this surface I'll tape some 1200 wet or dry paper. So yeah, I'm going to get on with that now. It's not particularly interesting from a spectator point of view, so I'll see you on the other side. Right, so there we go. The next step for me is to carve the neck of the guitar, and I will show you that in the next video. So until then, you take care. Thanks again for watching, and yeah, see you soon. Cheers.